Hey guys.
Oh, it's me and Oliver.
And I'm recording at this awkward angle to start so that you can see Foxfire Coven's new banner, which I'm super excited about. We started we started on this collectively several months ago because everybody in our group is super crafty, although only really one of us, Lore, has any real skill or training. The rest of us are just very haphazard and mostly follow her cutting instructions. But she did... actually, I can't even really remember if we helped at all on this, aside from financial contributions. I don't remember if we cut or if she did all the cutting. I think we helped. I don't even know. I might have not had anything to do with the beauty of this banner. But I wanted to share it with you because it's fucking amazing. Look, it has tassels. And I'm going to be hanging it on a rod above our altar in the Coven stead. I'm super pumped about it. So, hooray. There we are. Okay, now I'm going to readjust so I'm not looking down at you. I kind of thought I'd made a video about this before. I didn't, but I've probably written about it. You know, I don't even know. But I wanted to talk about it, and if it's again, then it's again. So the issue of the whole Coven practice versus solitary practice, and the reason I wanted to talk about it is not necessarily that I'm going to tell you a whole lot that you don't already know, but rather that every video or article I've seen about the issue of practicing in a coven versus practicing solitary has been told from the perspective of somebody who has never been in a coven, or at least hasn't been in a coven that had a lot of structure. So I thought, since I've done both, I should throw in my own 2 cents, because I don't think the Coven perspective is really represented very well, which is not to say that I think that one is better than the other or whatever, but rather that most of the perspectives floating around are largely the same perspective. So I thought I would just provide another angle for those of you who are interested. And I'm doing this in the form, essentially, of myths about being in a coven. And I will preface this, because I do a lot of prefacing, with saying that obviously every coven is going to be different, and there are going to be exceptions to everything that I'm about to tell you, but I wanted to just throw some things out that generally I have found to be true, and I wanted to bring to people's attention. I'm doing this in the form of a series of myths. Or rather, not myths necessarily, but the kinds of concerns that people raise about covens. Okay. The first one. The thing that I hear over and over again from people who say that they've chosen to be solitary over working in a coven is that they don't want to sacrifice their autonomy and they don't want to be told what to do. The assumption is that being in a coven means that you have to sacrifice your individual beliefs and practices, you have to sacrifice your personal agency, and suddenly you're just sort of at the mercy of people who are in charge telling you what to do. And this simply isn't true. Not to say, of course, that sacrifices aren't made or that there aren't domineering people out there running groups, but at no point in the covens that I have been involved in have I ever been asked to stop being an autonomous adult with some significant degree of agency over my personal witchcraft practice. Being part of an organized coven within a particular tradition means that you agree to abide by particular things when you're with the group. It doesn't necessarily mean that you can't go off and do other things when you're on your own time. It also doesn't mean that I have somebody that is constantly telling me what to do, okay? I defer to my high priestess and high priest because they have a body of knowledge and training that I'm seeking to acquire, and I defer to them in the same way that I would defer to a parent or to a college professor or anybody else in some position of authority over me. You don't allow your college professor to take advantage of your financial resources or to take advantage of you sexually or whatever, but you still have a certain level of deference to them because of the level of authority that they have, okay? It doesn't mean that you stop being an adult when you're in their classroom, okay? And if you do, if that is your experience with college professors, then there's some other problems that need to be addressed. So being in a coven does not mean that you sacrifice your autonomy. It doesn't mean that you no longer get to think for yourself. It doesn't mean that you're just blindly taking orders from people who are the boss of you now. And if that is what's happening, then you might have some things to reconsider. So there's the first thing. The second thing, and I actually made myself a little note in my phone, but I clearly didn't save it, so this is totally off the cuff. The second thing is I wanted to address the warning that people always give about nudity and sexuality and sexual perversion, etc., in coven groups, because there's always that tagline everywhere about how we need to watch out because there are people out there who are trying to take advantage of other people sexually, all right? And that's certainly true. There are a lot of assholes out there in every community, and we need to be collectively aware of that. But the presence of nudity, sexuality, or even the physical practice of sex does not mean that the coven is automatically bad or that you should run away or that they're doing something horrible and taking advantage of people. Wicca, particularly traditional strands of Wicca, is extremely sexual. It's a central theme. And just because everybody's naked, and just because some people sometimes have sex with each other, and even sometimes if they do it ritually in some kind of environment, that doesn't mean that they're doing it wrong. Oh God, my fire alarm is dying, and it beeps at me, and a lady's voice yells, and then Oliver gets scared. But just because those kinds of themes are present doesn't mean that you automatically need to run away and that they're horrible people. Again, lots and lots of horribleness can and does occur. I have never encountered it personally. Actually, I've had more problems with teachers growing up, so maybe you should be more concerned about your kids in high school and college than you should about exploring covens. I don't think that this is as prevalent as solitaries sometimes make it sound when they put out warnings about sexual deviance or sexual abuses in coven environments. Not to say people shouldn't be wary, but I think of all the things to be wary about, that's really not number one on the list. I would personally be much more concerned about people who try to take financial advantage, right? People who charge for things, or not necessarily charge, but charge in kind of ridiculous ways. Or people who just lie about their lineage or whatever. Like that's a lot more common than the sexual problematic stuff. So a couple of points about that. The third thing, and the last thing, because the video is getting too long. The third thing is the assumption that being in a coven means that you are not also a solitary. The biggest myth of the whole thing is that you have to choose between being in a coven or being a solitary witch. And the reality is that you don't. A witch who is also in a group is still a witch when she goes home at night, and she probably has her own personal practice, her own particular kind of altar, her own whatever. And if you've developed a strong solitary practice over the years and you're interested in coven work, it doesn't mean you have to throw away everything that you've ever done individually. The whole point of being in a coven, at least from my perspective and in my experience, has been to come together as witches and to explore and to experiment and to do things together, because collectively, if you're doing it well, you're more powerful as a group than you are individually. And if you're in a particular kind of structure where there's training and there are leaders, then you're also learning from people who have more experience than you. That's why you come together in a coven. It's not because you can't do anything by yourself, or you're incapable of practicing magic alone, or whatever. I don't know any witches in covens who don't also have solitary practices, and overwhelmingly the witchcraft that I practice alone. So my participation in a coven, of course it impacts my solitary practice, but it's not a matter of choosing one or the other. And that, I think, is the biggest kind of fallacy about the whole conversation, is that you have to choose, and you don't. The way some things are set up, you can even be in more than one kind of group, depending on what you're up to. You might go through phases where you're one or the other, but it's not a question of just having to choose. Both solitary practice and coven work are awesome, and I would recommend that if you have the opportunity to do group work, that you give it a whirl, because the assumption that you're just automatically not going to like it because you don't like being told what to do, or you're introverted, or you're afraid that somebody might try to have sex with you, or like, I mean, maybe those are good reasons, I don't know, but it makes me sad when people miss out on what might be a good opportunity for them because they're afraid based on what other people have told them goes on in covens. And finally, before I shut up for real this time, there are different kinds of groups and covens. Some of them are very highly structured, very hierarchical. Others are groups of equal friends who get together and hang out, and it's mostly about socializing. And there's this whole just gamut of ways to be in a witch group. And just because you don't like one doesn't mean you won't like others, or it doesn't mean that you won't like it at particular times in your life. You know, some people just want to come out for Sabbats, and there are groups that accommodate that. So I just wanted to say that, you know, you don't need to write it off just because of concerns that you might have that might be unrealistic or unreasonable. So I hope you all are well, and I hope you enjoyed the banner. I'm still enjoying the banner. And that is all.